Is there any validity to the claims that the current fiat monetary system is doomed to fail, or are we destined to live with this for the rest of our lives? Well, most people are unaware that this current system where we have fiat currencies all around the world has only existed for about 50 years since Nixon closed the gold window in 1971. Prior to that, there was always some sort of a gold standard somewhere in the world. But even though there was at least a gold exchange standard or a gold standard somewhere in the world, that didn't mean governments didn't try and move towards fiat so that they could exercise more control over their financial system. This control inevitably led to overprinting of their money that was supposed to be backed up by gold. They ended up hyperinflating their currencies. Their currencies lost purchasing power and they had a monetary reset. And so I'd like to show you how we are going through a similar system change right now and what it will probably look like as we shift into a new monetary system and what that future monetary system might look like. It's no secret that over the past few years, the Federal Reserve and central banks all around the world have overprinted money. That's the reason why we have such high inflation that is beating records of inflation for decades right now. It's a result of all that money printing. As that new money works its way throughout the economy, it's bidding up the prices of goods and services to the point where people can barely afford them anymore. And so central banks are now tasked with fixing the problem that they caused in the first place by printing too much money, trying to get that inflation under control. The main tool that they're using to do this is raising interest rates. Now, raising interest rates is an effective tool to cause a slowdown in the economy when you have an over-leveraged economy, because as that debt continues to get more and more expensive, it means you're taking more and more income to continue servicing that debt or paying off that debt. As more income gets diverted to the debt, then that's less income available to pay for other things and to keep on buying things at higher and higher prices. The problem is that the Federal Reserve and central banks around the world rely on outdated models that have proven to be incorrect about how the economy works, and they look at lagging indicators instead of leading indicators. This is one of the reasons why it took them so long to respond to the inflation that they caused, because based on their models, they thought them printing all that money shouldn't have caused sustained inflation. Obviously, they were wrong, and it took them way too long to respond to that inflation to try and fight it. This also means that they're going to be way too late to respond to the deflationary pressures that have been building up for over a year now. So by the time that they recognize they've already done enough to stop inflation, it will be too late. They will have done too much, and we're going to start to see some massive deflation instead. Part of this will look like unemployment, wages lost, pay cuts. You're going to see asset prices continue to fall most likely. And it's very likely that within the next year or two, we enter into a deep recession, potentially even depression. Now, all of that is likely by itself, but other things that make it even more likely are more geopolitical uncertainty, unrest around the world, deglobalization, and de-dollarization as the rest of the world looks for a way out of using the dollar. This means that at some point within the next year or 2 years, society again will look to the Federal Reserve for a bailout. Only this time, they're not going to offer it the same way they did last time. You see, 2020 and 2021 will still be in very recent memory. Powell will probably still be the chairman. And so the Federal Reserve will look at the economy and say, hey, look, we can bail the economy out again. We just can't do it the way we did last time. They're going to look at people like you and me and say, hey, last time we gave you stimulus checks, you went out and you hoarded toilet paper. Last time we gave you stimulus checks, you went out and you caused lumber shortages. You caused the used car market to skyrocket. You caused supply chain bottlenecks by buying up a bunch of stuff that you didn't need. You caused a bunch of bubbles by buying up stocks that ended up just being meme stocks and potentially even fraudulent, like Nikola. You went out and you actually invested in real frauds like cryptocurrencies and NFTs, and you caused massive dislocations in the market because you were too stupid to do the right thing with the money that we gave you. So they'll say all of the problems that happened as a result of the way things were handled in 2020 and 2021. It wasn't the fact that we printed trillions of dollars, it was the fact that you did the wrong thing with those trillions of dollars. So they'll say that, we can bail you guys out again, we just have to this time have more control over how you spend your money. Now we have to pause here and explain the 4 types of money that exist. There are only 4 categories of money. There is a private ledger, a public ledger, commodity money, and commodity-backed money. Those are the only 4 types of money that exist. The fiat system that we have today is a form of private ledger money. When you put your money in a bank, all it exists is a ledger. It's just a list. It's like an Excel spreadsheet that has all the different accounts and how much money is in each account, who those accounts belong to, and what transactions took place that got that money into the account. And every bank has their own ledger, and then the central bank has its own ledger, which is the transactions among its member banks. And so all that exists here in terms of money is not a commodity. It's not physical cash. It's just a bunch of different lists that are records of all the money. These are private ledgers because the banks themselves maintain the only ability to see the entire list. Like only your bank, let's say Chase, can see all the information about all the Chase accounts. And then they maintain all the control. For instance, if you for some reason, if you wanted to, give money to somebody who is deemed a terrorist, they could pull that money back. If you decide to open up a business, on OnlyFans or a gold dealer or marijuana or guns, they can just say, no, we don't want to do business with you, and they can lock down your account and stop letting those transactions happen. So private ledgers maintain control. So that is one type of money, and that's the type of money that we have today. It's a somewhat distributed, decentralized private ledger system. The next system is a public ledger. This would be something like Bitcoin, where the ledger itself, the list, is accessible to anybody, and the control over that network is controlled by all of the users of that network. And so you don't have a CEO or a management team or a group of people in control over it. It's the entire conglomerate that controls it. So that is a public ledger. Now, we also have commodity money, which is, in thousands of years ago, you actually had gold coins, silver coins, the actual commodity traded as money. So when you went to do an exchange, you actually handed over a physical commodity in exchange for what you were buying. So the physical commodity is what was the money. Then a few hundred years ago, the transition happened where you went to commodity-backed money, which is the 4th type of money, where you have a commodity that's in storage, and then you have something else like a paper receipt that trades hands that represents ownership of that commodity that is in storage. But the money that's actually trading hands is like a paper receipt that has value because it is allegedly redeemable for whatever commodity is being held in storage. And we had this type of money system until 1971 when Nixon took us off the gold standard. So any type of money that exists is one of those 4 types of money. So back to the failure of the fiat system that we have today. In light of the next crisis, the Fed will offer a bailout, but they'll say they need to do it with a central bank digital currency. This is simply taking all the ledgers that exist today, centralizing it onto one central database, one central ledger that is controlled exclusively by the Federal Reserve. This will allow them to maintain control over the flow of resources in an economy by causing or stopping transactions from happening that they deem would be incorrect for the economy. If there are gas shortages, they can institute gas rations so that if you spend $400 a month on gas and they say, no, anybody who spends more than that is hoarding, they can just shut off those transactions. And if you go to try and spend your money at a gas station, you've already spent $400, the transaction won't go through. They can also try and cause stimulus for certain areas of the economy, saying, hey, we're going to credit everybody's account with $1,000 and it can only be used in the next 30 days, only on goods and services. You can't use it on things like rent. You can't use it on things like entertainment. And so if you use it on things like food, you have 30 days to use it, otherwise it expires. And in doing so, you maintain control over everything that happens in an economy, because everything that happens in an economy, half of it is money. Half of every transaction is money. So instead of like the days of old, where in order to have top-down control over an economy like communism, you had to maintain laws and regulations and control over the flow of resources, commanding where one thing went, you don't have to do that anymore. All you have to do is electronically control how the money is spent, and then you control what happens on the other side of that money, which is every single transaction. transaction. So the United States and many other countries will, in my opinion, in the next 2 years, roll out something like a central bank digital currency, and people will be happy to accept the handcuff that a central bank digital currency represents because it comes alongside a handout, and they'll be happy to receive that handcuff with that $1,000, $2,000 UBI. Now, at the same time, we're seeing countries around the world say, no, we don't want a part of this system. We're seeing countries like Russia, China, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, India, talk about developing a new international currency controlled by no single country, kind of like the euro, but one that's backed up by commodities like oil and gold. That way you have a currency that can be used for international trade that can't be abused or the value changed or sanctions put in place by any single country, and that would serve as a good, solid medium of exchange between countries for international trade. We're seeing all of these same countries slowly start to de-dollarize and move away from using the dollar as the global reserve currency, move away from using treasuries as their main source of reserves and cash. We're seeing even like places like Japan, who have historically been the biggest buyers of treasuries, they're not buying anymore, they're selling. And so we're seeing a global shift away from using dollars. So in light of this, we are also likely to see many countries adopt a new commodity-backed money at some point in the future. If we rewind the clock back to 1967, central banks around the world were starting to stockpile gold. Why? Well, because they saw the writing on the wall. They knew that there were too many dollars in circulation for the amount of gold that America said they were redeemable for. And so central banks started stockpiling gold, knowing that eventually that peg would break and gold would become a lot more valuable. Well, in 2022, central banks actually bought more gold than they have since 1967. When central banks started stockpiling gold in preparation for the end of the gold standard, central banks are doing this again. They're starting to buy up more gold than they have in over 50 years in anticipation of the failure of fiat. Now, if you'll notice, we've covered two options so far. Some countries will try CBDCs, some countries will try commodity-backed money. There are two other options though. One of them is commodity money. Now, in my opinion, it's almost a 0% chance that any commodity will ever be used as money again. Because if I want to send a payment to somebody in the Philippines, in China, I can't do that with a commodity. I have to do that digitally. Otherwise, it just costs too much money and risks too much loss to try and send a physical commodity for payment a long distance away. That's why fiat was invented in the first place, hundreds of years ago. And so unless we have a 100% complete reset where we go back to the Stone Ages and no technology exists anymore and we're restricted to just doing trade with our local community, we will likely never see a commodity serve as money again. Commodity-backed money, sure. Commodity as money, probably never. But this leaves the fourth option, which is a public ledger. Now, we already know countries like El Salvador have adopted Bitcoin as legal tender, but the story that kind of doesn't get told a lot is many developing nations, especially in Africa, the people are starting to use Bitcoin more and more and more. This is in rejection of their own government's central bank digital currencies. Countries like Ghana, countries like Nigeria, massive adoption by the people of Bitcoin, and it's only growing and getting better over time, especially with innovations like the Lightning Network that makes small transactions instant and free. So when this current fiat monetary system finally fails, which is a matter of when, not a matter of if, every fiat currency throughout history has failed. And global reserve currencies change with whoever is the superpower at the time. This means that we will have competitors for the new base form of money for everyone around the world pop up. One of them will be CBDCs, another one will be commodity-backed money, and another one will be Bitcoin. Now, in my opinion, central bank digital currencies are doomed to fail because you cannot exert top-down control over a complex system without catastrophic errors that result in the destruction of the system itself. So central bank digital currencies will be tried and most certainly will fail. This means that when we look long term, like decades into the future, we've got two options for what this future monetary system looks like. It will likely either be something like Bitcoin or a commodity-backed money. Now, I personally have no idea which one will win. Really what it comes down to is what the people choose. When you look back at history and study the declines and the falls of empires and of currencies, what you notice is that the money that a government chooses after the last money failed is almost always the money that the people have already chosen. Because by the time the government's money fails, that means people have stopped accepting it for payment. They've already started accepting payment of something else. So if the government wants any purchasing power whatsoever, they are forced to adopt the money that the people have already started using. At the end of the day though, money is a winner-take-all game. So one of them will win, and we are not going to have competing money systems forever. That's why, despite all of its flaws, the dollar is still the global reserve currency today. This comes down to the coincidence of wants. Basically, if you have, let's say, two people in an economy, one is a shoemaker and one has an apple tree. So I make shoes and I want your apples, and I go to give you my shoes and you already have shoes. And so you don't want to give me apples for shoes because you have no use for shoes. So I go to somebody else, let's say there's a third person now who has rice, and I find out that you want some rice. And so I go to the rice maker and I give him my shoes so I can get some rice, so I can give the rice to you so I can get some apples. Well, obviously, every single extra person that you add adds complexity, and there would be a chance then that I would have to start storing some sort of commodity or asset that, not because I want it, but just because I know that it has the highest likelihood of most other people wanting it. And this is the birth of money. Money is the thing that most people will accept as payment, even if they don't want it, but just because they know that other people will accept it as payment. The good news is that whatever that next monetary system is built on, whatever kind of money we have going forward into the long-term future, it is almost certainly going to be much better for everybody than the system that we currently have that serves government's ability to spend and waste endless amounts. As always, I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.